We're honored to be here today to represent ELPA 21, a new assessment consortium for measuring English language proficiency. It's funded by an enhanced assessment grant from the US DOE, and it's a partnership of 11 states, and we are developing a new ELP assessment system that corresponds to the Common Core and states' rigorous new college and career ready standards. And so we're going to explore the term innovation at several junctures in the test development process. So thank you, Emily. I'd like to introduce my co-presenters first, and to my right, your left, is Emily Pooler from Educational Testing Service, who is doing our item development work and chairing it, and also to the right of her is Phoebe Winter, who heads up the ELPA 21 item development work team. So what we're going to examine today in thinking about the word innovation are at least four things. And innovative item types are necessary to assess the rigorous knowledge and skills and abilities that are required for success in the general education classroom, and especially as we try to prepare our students for a global environment. Then we're not quite sure what it'll look like for them, but we're going to hopefully give them what they need to be successful. And although the word innovative is used widely by test developers, by vendors, by state and national assessments, we really don't have a common definition or a shared understanding about what makes an assessment item innovative, or how and if innovative items differ from technology-enhanced items. So that's our exploration for today. I'm Margaret Ho. I'm a former chair of the executive board for ELPA 21. And in the course of this presentation, we're going to invite you to discuss some questions that occurred to us as we were putting this presentation together, and any more that you care to add. I should probably mention that Paula Mahaley from Ohio, who was to have joined us today to give the state's perspective, is unfortunately not well today, so she's unable to come. So I will be stepping in for her. So here are the questions we'd like you to think about. So we're sort of seeding the presentation with these up front. Because innovative item types are found in a variety of modern assessments, applicable both to English learners and the general population, we think that a common definition would be of broad interest and benefit to us in the assessment community. So a shared understanding will facilitate item development knowledge shared across states, and also express uniformly high expectations for what innovative item types are, and a more universal application of technology as it relates to innovative item type delivery and response collection. So this is me. And I'm to give the state perspective, and my state is Washington, so we have sort of flipped out Ohio for Washington for this morning's discussion. Washington had, as part of the state's flexibility application, now denied, we do have that unique status of having tried 3 times and failed. So we will be measuring AYP next year. Okay, so let's set that aside. But we, as part of our flexibility application, as all of you know, we were, all states are required to have new ELP standards that are aligned and show some correspondence to college and career ready standards in other content areas. So timing is everything, and we were fortunate to have this commissioned work with a very, very long title that you see on your screen. Hereinafter we'll refer to as the framework. It was available to us to frame our thinking and discussion going forward for developing the new ELP standards. So we think of it as a real seminal piece. This is available on CCSSO's website and also on my state's webpage, and other states as well. I'd also like to acknowledge the state of California's work on developing new ELP standards. Their effort gave us tremendous liftoff in the development of ours too. But we had the additional mandate from our member states to show correspondence not only to the content area of English language arts, but also to mathematics and to science. So this is a Venn diagram, probably familiar to some of you by now, that represents an exploration done at the Understanding Language Initiative House at Stanford University about what are those practices that relate to language functions in the college and career ready standards. And this has helped us tremendously. In the framework that I showed you in the slide before, the idea of practices in the content standards was put forward as a way of expressing the language demands that students face as they're engaging in general education instruction. So this second seminal document addresses the way new ELP standards and assessments operationalize the disciplinary uses of language and what we call practices. And I know from where you're seated, the tiny type in the circles probably isn't legible, but this slide as part of the standards is available widely, not only at CCSSO's webpage, but also on Stanford's Understanding Language Initiative webpage and on individual states' webpage, such as mine. We use this to take a look at what it is that kids need to do in order to write the new standards. And so you'll see there's areas of overlap, and in the center where it looks white, the background is looking white. This is where actually the practices in all three of these content areas overlap. So that's priority number one. And then we wrote the standards to include all of the rest of the practices that are in areas of overlap and also unique to certain content areas. So these are the standards. We have 10. And so we're talking about an assessment system, and since the assessment system is under development, we thought the best way to show how we operationalize the disciplinary uses of language was to show you our 10 standard statements. So Washington adopted these new standards in December of 2013. The standards are organized by grade separately, K and 1, and thereafter by grade band, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 through 8, and 9 through 12. But there are hot links with correspondence to the college and career ready standards at each grade level that makes them user-friendly to the general education teacher as well as to the ELP professional. So the new standards have created for us in Washington an opportunity we've never had before, and that is every PD effort that's originating out of our teaching and learning section of our State Department of Education includes the ELP standards at the get-go. Because there is that portion, as you know, in the ELA standards that says students need to know the language of the content areas. So we are no longer in the sort of secondary consideration position, or we'll talk about English learners later. So it's been a tremendous opportunity for the English learners in our state to be included in the thinking and PD right up front. You'll notice that these are color-coded, and there's a black line here separating standards into two groups. Numbers 1 through 7 are new and reflect the correspondence that I showed you in the last Venn diagram that were identified as being the disciplinary uses of language that are important to include. And so if you read through them, you'll see that there's a lot of familiar terminology that may be present in your state's college and career ready standards. But numbers 8 through 10 sort of reflect the structural approach or the forms of English that are typical of existing or older ELP standards that we have all had in our states. And so it's important to think about English language learning and include what we already know about second language acquisition. And so those pieces are in 8, 9, and 10. Just a quick snapshot of where our states are in ELPA 21 Consortium. You can see that our states are from West Coast to East Coast, and incorporates states with a lot of diversity, not only geographically, but politically, and in terms of the ELL population. So we have states that are members of other consortia, such as Smarter Balanced and PARC, DLM, NCSIC. We also have states that are independent, not aligned with any other assessment consortia. We have states that have adopted the CCSS and the NGSS, and we have states that have their own college and career ready standards. So it is quite a diverse group, but each state brings some experience and resources to the consortium which are of great value, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. And here we are. The minute is here. So we are collaborating with what we call thought partners, as well as with states with their own resources. And I'd just like to point out the value added that we in Washington feel we're getting from joining a consortium rather than going it alone with our own, writing our own standards and having our own developed assessment as we have in the past. So at the top right, the CCSSO is our management partner. This is bringing to us a tremendous amount of organizational experience and expertise. And the bottom right, we have CRESST at UCLA. They are our evaluators and have been helping us tremendously with thinking through the validity arguments that we hope to address. In the middle and centrally located is Understanding Language Initiative, providing the content direction that we so rely on in order to know that we're all about the right things. On the bottom right, we are partnered with NCEO, and Martha Thurlow and her team have been helping us think through access and accommodations for English learners, as well as thinking about what is it in terms of a definition, an operationalized definition, what is it that an English learner is? We also would like to especially emphasize in terms of state resources, the Oregon Department of Education. They were the awardee for the Enhanced Assessment Grant, but what they brought to us is 8 years of electronically testing English learners on an ELPA, an experience that my state didn't have. We're still back on paper pencil, and a lot of the other states are as well. So having a state with a long history of doing electronic testing has been invaluable as we go forward developing our own new assessment system. So I'm going to turn this over now to Emily Pooler, who's going to talk to us about what is an innovative item.
Thank you. So I've been an item writer for 18 years at ETS and been hearing more and more over the past 5 years about innovative item. What is an innovative item? Is your test going to have innovative items? And it's been very exciting to now be working with ELPA 21 to develop innovative items. But what is an innovative item? So here's a definition. Features new methods, advanced and original. And if you do a quick search for innovative test item, you'll get about 13,000 results. I don't know if the print's too small to see, but basically we find information about an innovative test item that contains content or functionality that's not possible in a text-based multiple choice question or item. Or it's items that have interactivity that's unlike something that you're doing in a traditional paper and pencil item. So many definitions exist, but let's look at what some existing types of innovative items are, and these are some that have been identified in the literature. Hotspot items come to mind, drag and drop, ranking and sequencing, multiple selection, open-ended multiple choice. So these are some that exist today. But what are the characteristics of these innovative items? So the thing that's really exciting for a test developer is that these show great promise for improving the quality and validity and reliability of the information that we capture, so that our assessments I believe, with these innovative items, give us a much more reliable body of evidence to make inferences about the students' abilities. We do find that they elicit very positive reactions from students. They're much more engaging. They can be adaptive. And again, this interactivity allows us to align much more closely with curriculum and with authentic context that students find themselves in the classroom. So traditional items tend to be very fixed. The student either reads or listens to get the input. There's a fixed stem that's typically text-based. The responses are fixed. It's typically text-based. And then they respond by either selecting the options, or for a constructed response, they might write or speak. And that's the way that we've traditionally been able to capture and gather evidence of what the students can do. But with innovative items, we're really able to do, I think, much more, more interactive, back and forth, not necessarily static. So the students don't have to just read or listen. They can read and listen and or watch. They get a lot more input just in the prompt or stimulus. The item format, again, can be text, but it can also have graphics. It can have sound. There's a lot more ways that we can associate media with the item format and their response action, how they produce, how they show what they can do. The students can write and speak and select. They can sort, they can perform. There's a lot more that they can do. And it gives us this data that we're not going to talk about today, but as we're really thinking about these questions about what are the scoring models, what data mining can we do, what kind of information can we capture, we can capture a lot more about what the students are doing as they answer. So we're looking at new scoring models, and again, coming up with a new understanding of what students can do with their language. It's safe to say that innovative items, the ones that we see in the literature and how they're described, are technology-enhanced items. We can have a separate discussion of whether you can have innovative items on paper, but what we're seeing in the literature and all of the definitions of these are technology-enhanced. And so Phoebe is now going to walk you through what ELPA 21 has done to implement some of these innovations.
So as I was saying, these standards we're using are much different from what the most current language proficiency tests are based on. I went back and just had a little fun looking at standards from around 2005, which was when some of the current last generation tests are. And as you can see, they're very domain focused for the most part, and with some nod to the interactive nature of language, but not a whole lot. So this is, again, part of our standards, and I just wanted to show you the kind of performance level descriptor. This is the performance level descriptor for performance descriptor for level 4 in grades 6 through 8. How do we measure these types of standards? So what we've been trying to do is develop item and tasks that reflect the innovation in the standards and use technology as a tool, not as a goal, but as a tool for getting as good as possible a measure of language proficiency as defined by the English Language Proficiency Standards. And the tasks you'll see have many characteristics that were noted in Emily's presentation. They're intended to be engaging. They really do allow for more universal design and access for students. They're interactive, and they align more closely with instruction than the tasks that we've had on the old test, although we did try. Our overall goal for innovation is not innovation. Our overall goal is to support valid inferences and have fidelity with respect to the standards in our assessment. So I'll be showing you some items that ETS developed that illustrate our approach. The thing to really understand is that we're still in the item development phase. These are mock-ups. These are not what students will see. Okay, this set of items illustrates how we're going to assess very young children with a computer. That's been one of the big questions, is can you put a kindergartner in front of a computer and have them do some work? So this illustrates how we're trying to use technology in the lower grades while making sure it's still very user-friendly. And ETS has done work in cognitive labs that shows young children, as young as kindergarten, can actually handle this kind of item. It's a click and click item if they're given appropriate instructions before they take the test.
Hi, my name is Jason. I need your help. Can you help me find some things in my bedroom? Click on the book. Click on the kite. Click on something you can wear. Click on something with wheels. Thank you. Now help me put some things away. Put the shoes under the bed. Put the jeans in the closet. Put the lamp on the table. Now help me choose a pillow. Choose the pillow with stripes. Put it on the bed.
That set of tasks can be handled by students now using the technology that most schools have. But we're hoping eventually to put that kind of task on touchpads, and that will make it even easier, and we can expand the kinds of things we assess. And I just wanted to keep connecting this back to the standards. The tasks are not for themselves, and they're not cool just because they're cool, at least to adults. But they do address, this task is designed to address the lower levels of 2 of the listening standards in kindergarten. Okay, and the next set of tasks kind of illustrates that as we're trying to appropriately reflect the multidimensional nature of the standards and the interactivity of language, we still are planning to report out scores at the domain level of reading, listening, writing, and speaking. You'll see that the next task maintains the interactive nature of language. But what we do is we provide supports for the receptive domain, because this task is intended to assess a child's speaking.
Today, we are going to see what happens when we put a white flower in a cup of colored water. Now watch. You need these materials: a bowl of water, purple food coloring, and a white flower. First, put the food coloring in the water. Second, put the flower in the bowl. Third, wait overnight. Look, the white flower is now purple.
Can you tell me what just happened?
Then the student hears the narrator saying, tell your friend, or I'm sorry, I can't even remember all the words, but tell your friend what your teacher did today. And then the examinee can think about what they're going to say and use the tool to record their response. What should be in that screen there is that the sequence of events that happen are shown in 5 pictures. So you see the materials, so the student doesn't have to rely on their memory. What we're trying to assess is speaking and giving them an academic context in which to do their speaking. And then the student will record his or her response, and then stop it. They can play back their recording, and they can re-record once if they don't like what they saw. And this kind of item is really very, very useful, because you can get at, depending with the right rubric, you can elicit responses from all 5 levels of a couple of speaking standards. The last item is a grade 6 through 8 reading item, and it's a complex informational text set in an academic science context. This whole set of items addresses multiple standards and proficiency levels across the item set, and we're not going to go see them, but they're all, each item is tied to at least one or two standards at particular proficiency levels. The passage is long. It reflects the kind of reading that's called for by college and career-ready standards. And it illustrates, this whole set illustrates again how ELPA 21 incorporates technology-enhanced items as appropriate and uses multiple choice items when you can measure things well. I want to remind you again that this is a mock-up. This is not how the students will see the passage. We'll be using technology that allows a student to see the passage and the items at the same time. And also, the item will be just presented in a little more straightforward way. But I wanted you to get the flavor of the level at which we're assessing English proficiency and see very clearly that we're trying to tie it into the kind of academic tasks that students will be needing to do as they're learning. And this is what we need English learners to know so that they can participate in academic content areas. So first what happens is the student is told that they'll be looking at an assignment a teacher gave the class, and the examinee will also be looking at a student's responses to those assignments. And it's actually a very interesting passage about how a hovercraft actually hovers and some of the science behind it. And the assignment to the students in the classroom is to do an experiment and make, a little hovercraft. You can just see this happening, can't you, in a like 7th grade classroom, and all the kids standing around arguing with each other. But, and then also record their results and their observations. So that keeps going through. It shows all the procedures. It shows a full assignment to the examinee, and it shows the question that the student in the classroom is being asked. And that will be very clear in the real thing. It's not very clear here. Okay, so this is the student's response. There's a report of their trials and how far things went, and then a description of their observations. That's what the examinee sees. And then here are the items that are based on this passage. So the first item is your basic multiple choice item. Note that it's not read aloud. This is a reading test. We won't be reading the items in the stems, the items in the options aloud in the reading test. At least that's what we're saying now. You know how these things change. And then this is a hotspot item. You can see how trying to ask this question in a multiple choice format would be very wordy, could be very awkward. And this really allows us to get at the degree to which the student understood that text without being, which of the following is, and then having like 5 different options that are very, very complex and hard to parse and all that. And again, the same thing happens here. And there are some more multiple choice items assessing their understanding of the text. And here's another item where what we ask the student to do is select, rather than, you can see that these could be done in multiple choice, but they're not, because we feel we can get at the construct much better and less awkwardly than we would with a multiple choice item. The whole set of items gets at the kinds of questions that students would. They don't have to understand the science behind it, but it relates it directly to the kind of analysis that you would do in a science class. Okay, so that's all of the item samples. The one thing I wanted to talk about too, I know we weren't going to talk about measurement models, but I just wanted to say that at least bring up the idea as we discuss what an innovative item is, that if we have innovative standards, and we have ways of measuring these standards in a way we feel might be closer to the constructs we want to get to, do we need innovative measurement models? So one thing ELPA 21 is planning to do with our field test data is to test various multidimensional IRT models, to look at, everybody knows language is interactive. That first slide that says it's interactive was like, yeah, right. But how does that affect the students' responses? We have for years been reporting reading, writing, listening, speaking as though those were 4 different things. And we know they're not, and we haven't known how. We figure there's probably a multidimensional characteristic affecting student responses, but we really haven't been able to take the time to do some analyses on this. So the folks at CRESST will be directing analyses of the field test data to try out various multidimensional IRT models and see what works, and also looking at unidimensional models, of course, as well. We might end up using a mixture of two different models depending upon what we're reporting. And the other kind of neat thing that's going to be done is we're going to be incorporating deliberately multidimensional items. I mean, that was just so much fun to try to think of designing an item that is deliberately multidimensional, because that's so different from what we're allowed to do in testing. And so that we can try to better understand the multidimensionality that could, in the response data that's meant to not be multidimensional. And I'm just really excited about that. So. I think the item presentation, I did the item presentation because I'm leading the item in a item development team, but I wondered if Emily's been working on the items themselves, if you have any behind the scenes things that might be interesting on those items I showed.
Thank you. I think one of the things that has been very interesting is that the reading passages for ELPA 21 have all had to go through state approval of the consortium states, but also by educator review of consortium educators. And that was a very positive experience. Teachers are advocates for their students. I'm still an ESL teacher. We are advocates for our students. And sometimes you get teachers giving feedback, oh, that's too difficult for my students. I don't want them to take that difficult passage and not do well on the test. This time with Common Core, we had a very strong reaction from teachers saying, yes, this is the text complexity that our students need to be able to read and have access to. Here's some ways you could gloss it. Don't delete that word. Keep that word there, but provide a little bit more support for them. That was overwhelming, the overwhelming response that we got from the educators. So all of the reading passages are seen by state educators and approved. They can reject them. The topics for our science, that observe and report type topic, also comes from the state educators. They, grade level teachers, gave us the ideas. We had science teachers as well look at the science standards to make sure that those, confirm that those were grade appropriate. So we're getting a lot of input from teachers and very positive feedback from teachers. We've done some prototyping, not for ELPA 21, but on other projects, CogLab projects, and I have to say there's a couple things that we forget about very young learners, and one is just what was said here of how good they are with technology, much better than we are, and how quickly they pick up on it, but also how wonderful their new ideas are. So something like that purple flower is sort of not too exciting for us, but to them, they're mesmerized. Wow, does that really happen? Does that really work? And so to have something that engages them, that really does engage a kindergartner. And to have them to be taking a test in a way that really that kind of discourse, to be able to relate a narrative in the past, there's a lot of research, that's one of the primary discourse forms that you find in elementary schools, that it's an exciting and engaging and fun way to see if they're able to produce that discourse. So I think the more we work with kids, the more we work with teachers who have those kids, the better our items will be. Sure. So we did have, in May, we brought in, I believe, 60 teachers, 10 per grade band, to help us write the items, actually to write the items. And we actually gave them all of the reading passages that had been approved by the states to then start writing the items to support that, to give us feedback, to give us topics, to really confirm grade appropriate content, and to really write a lot of items. We came up with 1,290 items. They were very enthusiastic. We were supposed to end at 4:30, and I will tell you the kindergarten teachers didn't leave that room till 6:30. There wasn't overtime pay, there wasn't anything. They wanted to sit and be a part of this and write items that their students would eventually get. So they were wonderful and just engaged and very involved and very dedicated to really advising and providing input on their grade level expertise on these items.
He asked how the items were scored, and that's a really good question. That's part of the research we're going to be doing. Of course, there are rubrics, temporary, beginning rubrics for, we have some constructed response items, and then scoring rules for the technology-enhanced items. But those we will be testing out in the field test to see how well they work. So right now, the scoring is based on the construct, and a description of levels based on what it is that our measurement target, but reality will hit us, and we'll adjust as the responses tell us to. Thank you. So the question relates to whether you get a lot of data when you deliver items online, and whether we're going to capture and analyze the kind of data we're getting, and we're still working on a very limited budget, but we are going to do as much of that as we can. And I think that might, from a qualitative perspective, help us understand some of the multidimensional nature of some of this. If we find certain sections seem to be more, or what we're calling speaking seems to be less unidimensional than other areas, we can go in and look at some of the more detailed responses to get information on that. So the question was how the speaking items would be scored, what kind of traits they'd be looking at, or would it be for content or for more of the speaking skills, the way you think of, one thinks of writing, generic writing skills that go across. Right now, they're mostly going to be focusing in on those speaking skills and not the content, except as appropriate to the standards. And we will be keeping that data, and it will be scored by vendors, and then we'll have that data available for additional analyses. Your question does lead me to this wealth of data we're going to have, and not enough money and not enough people in the world to do some really good analyses. And I think one of the things we might want to work towards is finding a way to make at least some of that data available to researchers.
So just to back up to where we started with the standards, we used evidence-centered design to look at the claims that we want to be able to make about the students at the end of the assessment. We wrote item specifications for task types that would help us elicit evidence to make the claims, and wrote standard test item specifications. So to those teachers, we brought the item specifications, but we did a training. We presented the standards to them again as a reminder of these are the claims that we want to be able to make in the end. Here's how the tasks that we think that will help us do this. And we, again, broke the teachers up by grade bands, looking at the item specifications. And for the listening, we had them generate topics. They worked in group, they brainstormed, we had posters all over. And again, then we had the next generation science standards up to look to make sure we weren't asking anything that was in a grade above, conceptually, developmentally, that these are appropriate, really relying on expert teacher judgment as well. And so they could write the items on item templates on computers or on paper, and it was really 50-50. Some people really do their creative and best thinking on paper, others wanted to do in technology, so we allowed them to do whatever way they wanted to. And after the workshop, they were able to take home assignments to do more if they wanted to. So for the reading passages, one of the criteria that the teachers could reject it was that it was not an interesting topic for them. And so that we used our best judgment, but in the end, we did rely on the consortium state teachers to provide us that feedback. We will be bringing all of the items for a multi-state review, content review, and bias and fairness review again. Every single item will be seen again by teachers for their comments and their suggestions. So it was again, I think expert judgment of trained item writers, then the support and confirmation by grade level teachers at the item writing level, and then we'll get that input from teachers as well. But I think we always tried to think of things that would be a twist, that would have a surprise, that's fun, just thinking about what kids typically react to. And again, these wonderful ideas that are so wonderful to them, just trying to keep that in mind.
This assessment is being designed primarily as a summative end of instruction or end of year of instruction assessment, and also primarily for accountability purposes. However, we want it to provide information that is very, so you can make valid inferences about students. So the items are going to be secure. So the student won't be able to go in and see their response to a particular item. But we are trying to think of ways to make the score reports more meaningful, given it's, you have a limited amount. We don't want people to go too far, but it's the same problem we always have. We want to give a good overall score, and we want to give as much information as we feel will provide a foundation for a valid inference, and we don't want to give them too much so they're making inferences all over the place. But yeah. Yeah, the question is about what about students with visual needs, and Margaret, I'll let you chime in too. That is a big struggle, because as you rely on technology, you're relying on a lot of visual input, and especially with English learners, that's what we're trying to do, is support the other domains with visual input and interaction. So we really are trying to make the test, I mean, the test is probably more accessible for more kids than a paper and pencil test is, but at the same time, perhaps less accessible for blind and visually impaired students. So we are working on ways of developing items that are brailleable, and we're using the alt text function, and working really closely with NCEO on trying to make a parallel version of this test that's testing the same constructs for students who are blind or visually impaired.
Also that we're looking into how to make items accessible to students who are deaf or hearing impaired or hard of hearing, and now a sort of a unique situation for an ELPA, students who do not speak. Question is about complexity of presentation in reading and listening. Yes.
So for reading, we have a set standard of reading level guidelines. We're using some tools, including one tool called Text Evaluator that ETS owns, and that takes into account a number of features: concreteness, complexity and density of sentences, academic word, familiar word, things like that. So we're looking at that for text complexity. We're including a range of passage lengths, short and long, so that for students who are at the entry-level beginners, that they still have a good chance to demonstrate their knowledge. For listening, it's interesting. We looked at some listenability tools, and the one that we found, I think, was developed in 1964 to assess radio broadcast, so that wasn't very useful. So we're really using, I think since 1965, ETS has been developing assessments that have listening comprehension for TOEFL, TOEIC, some domestic assessments as well. So we're looking at those. We want to make sure we're not testing memory, and so we do want to make sure that there is redundancy built in, because we want to test authentic language, that there are fillers, that there's false starts, people don't speak in complete sentences, so we're building those in, and field testing will give us some data, but we're using best practices from other assessments that we've done in K through 12 for listening.
2 minutes. I just wanted to add one thing to the reading. Although we're using a text evaluator tool, professional judgment trumps always the analytic formula.
Yeah. So if you have more questions, we'd really be happy to meet with you out in the hall or electronically if you care to email us. And thank you so much for coming this morning.